Hello and welcome to the Empowered Curiosity podcast. Today is another week that I get to invite one of my teachers onto the show. I've been taking a program called the Human Design Program. It's being taught by Nadia Last, who is our guest for today, and she co-teaches that with Sam Fotenhauer, who was a guest on the podcast just last week. So if this is an exciting conversation for you, if you want to talk about human design, go check out that one as well as listening to this one. Nadia is a spiritual therapist, a human design teacher, and when I got curious about human design, I knew that I wanted to do a deep dive into the system, and I had this intuitive sense of wanting to study with Nadia because her approach felt inviting and expansive rather than prescriptive. That's something that feels like a really, really big place of discernment for me, is when people learn something and it feels really dogmatic rather than, hey, take this. This is wisdom from the universe. Make it your own. And I feel like Nadia has a really, really permissive way of teaching. And that's why I chose to take her program. So Nadia is going to share her journey of climbing the corporate world and feeling empty while chasing success on everyone else's terms. When she found the world of spirituality, human design, and psychedelics, she gave herself the permission to fully lean into the fullest expression of who she is. And that's really the medicine I think that she carries just by being herself. But it's the medicine that she carries into her work with clients. And I could say also as her student, she does this with her students as well. If you listen to this episode, you are going to hear an inspiring conversation and discover the power of human design in unlocking your potential. I want to share a little bit about Nadia. She is a spiritual mentor, a human design teacher, a therapist in training, and host of The Current, which is a podcast that unpacks the changing tides of collective consciousness. She also supports psychedelic healing retreats and is passionate about the use of psychedelics in safe and legal settings. If you're listening to this episode, I've also collaborated with her and done an episode for her podcast, which is The Current. And in that episode, what we did is she did a human design reading for me. And last minute, I was just like, hey, what if we just record this and put it out on one of our podcasts? And so just to cross-pollinate our beautiful audiences, we put it out on her podcast. And so if you are curious about my human design type, if you want to learn a little bit more about me, it's a bit of a vulnerable space because I don't always share all the nitty-gritty details of my life, but I do so in that episode. So I am a 2/5 manifesting generator, and we kind of unpack what that means and why it feels so aligned to be doing the work that I do, given my human design blueprint. So couple places to send you off to if this conversation interests you. Go check out the episode with myself and Sam Fotenhauer, which was just released last week, and then go check out the episode where Nadia does a human design reading for me on The Current. Hello and welcome to the Empowered Curiosity podcast. I have been completely nerding out about human design for the last couple of months, I want to say. So much so that I reached out to Nadia Last, who is sitting here with me. She's a human design reader, and I decided to enroll in her human design training course. And so you are sitting with my human design teacher, and that is one of the many hats that she wears. She's also a therapist in training. She does supported work with psychedelics. And so I'm really excited to see where this conversation goes. Welcome to the show, Nadia.
Thank you so much, Kat. And I think I'm curious. Initially, I can't exactly remember how you found me. Was it through a Google search?
No, it was actually through one of my clients. She had a reading with you, and she just raved about you and just how grounded you felt. So then I went and listened to a bunch of your podcast episodes. So folks, please, if you are interested in human design and you don't just talk about human design, like there's a lot of really, really juicy topics on your playlist there. Go check out Nadia's podcast. It's called The Current. And we did a little bit of a impromptu episode for your podcast. I asked if you wanted to just record the reading that you did for me and put that out into the world as a podcast episode, just to see if people wanted to see what like a human design reading is like. And so if you're curious about all the like ins and outs of my particular chart, it's going to be up on Nadia's podcast. So yeah, that's how I found you, is through personal recommendation and then binging a lot of your episodes. And I just really resonated with, how do I say this? I feel like I get a little skeptical whenever I'm diving into a new thing, because folks can be a bit dogmatic. Folks can be a little bit like, this is the answer, this is the way, this is the, the thing that has rescued me from my suffering. And so I'm really careful about what kind of information I'm taking in that particular regard. And what I loved about you and your co-host, Sam, I can never pronounce her name, Fottenhauer. Did I say that right?
Fotenhauer, love it.
Fotenhauer. Yes. Yeah. What I love about it is it's like one tool in a big toolkit of ways to understand and experience the world. So I'm curious about, I guess, your discovery of human design and what role it plays in your life, and maybe we can just start the conversation there.
Yeah. Well, I love that reflection so much, Kat, and I'm soaking up the reflection of you receiving that it doesn't feel dogmatic the way that we speak about human design. For anybody just starting to get into human design, you'll likely find people on the internet who are very dogmatic in their approach. Mm-hmm. And having grown up in a very religious household, I'm also very skeptical of any one system that somebody says, this is the way, drop everything and follow this beyond a shadow of a doubt. So it's really, really, really a big tenet. And ethically, I feel like my responsibility as I teach human design and share human design, that human design is not the answer. You are the answer. We are awakening to the fact that each one of us has a deep inner wisdom available to us in every single moment that we decide to get still and quiet and listen. Mm-hmm. And I think human design is an excellent tool for getting us right back to that place. But as we're recording this, you mentioned that I work with psychedelic supported work, which I do. We have a retreat coming up in Costa Rica, and the website is called samesummit.com. And the reason why it's Same Summit is there's this very powerful phrase in spirituality and wellness circles that it's the same mountain, but there are many paths up that same summit. Mm-hmm, so whether it's psychedelic work or breath work or human design or Enneagram, like whatever it is that gets you to that still, quiet place within yourself, that's very fertile with answers, I'm all about. So, but that didn't answer your question. How did I get into human design? Is that where you want to start today, Kat?
Yeah. Yeah. Go for it. I mean, I can just sit and listen to you talking about this for a while. So however you want to take that question.
I love it. And you're taking a sip of your beverage. So I guess where my story wants to start today is growing up religiously and going through 10 to 15 years where I was hopefully agnostic for a long while and didn't really believe in anything. I was really kind of distracted by the material world. There are many distractions on this plane. I was climbing the corporate ladder. I was trying to achieve success on everybody else's terms. And, I felt pretty empty. I was climbing this ladder, and as I, got onto the next rung, I was looking around myself and saying, why am I climbing this? And I felt my motivation and my life force energy was really waning in my body. And this sort of like self-sourced motivation to outrun scarcity in my childhood and financial scarcity was waning. And it was something that I had relied upon my entire life to really motivate me. And I remember finding astrology, and I was a little bit skeptical because astrology was still in kind of like this almost religious territory for me, but I found an app called The Pattern that really helped describe my inner qualities. And I started doing astrology readings for family and friends. This was just before the pandemic began. And I remember I gave a reading to a friend, and she was like, this is cool, Nadia, but have you ever heard of human design? And I remember getting this text, and there was just this moment of kind of like recognition in my body. And it can't fully be explained, but I feel like we all have moments like this in our life where it's like, whoa, there's something here, whether it's meeting a potential partner or moving to like being in a place and having a recognition, like I will live here, or meeting an animal that you end up adopting, whatever it is. Like it was this moment that I had with human design. And I just started studying it. I voraciously consumed everything that I could find because, for those that don't know what human design is, it's kind of like a personality test times 1,000. And I've always been interested in things like Myers-Briggs and any sort of personality tests. I think they're like the leadership test that you can take in the corporate work setting. And I loved always learning more about myself. But human design is so specific and so tactical. It says this is how your energy works in the world. It has described things about myself that I didn't know if I could ever put into words. And I guess to answer your question of what do I receive from it, it's when I feel so wayward or lost in the throes of this life. It is very wild energetically on our planet right now. Human design is this very, very grounding tool that I use each and every day to say, this is my true north, and I can trust myself. And my incarnation is not by accident. And I have very unique gifts. And when I'm leaning into those, I'll know that I'm stepping more fully into purpose. It's been a tool for understanding myself, understanding how other people work, bringing about a lot of familial healing and understanding. And curiosity as an aspiring therapist. I'm in grad school right now. I'm in my second year. I'm going to graduate this fall with my master's in counseling psychology. And I think having human design as a backdrop for all of this work is approaching every single human with a curiosity, saying, you are wired so differently than me. What if I asked questions rather than assuming and projecting my answers onto you?
And I think that is the piece, like I've always kind of dabbled in like Myers-Briggs and Enneagram and things like that as well. But to me, that's what felt different about human design. And I think in particular, the way that you and Sam approach human design is it feels very permission based. And by that, I think that there's a way in which sometimes people will blame the stars and the moons and the planets for stuff happening in their lives or for how they are. And to me, that feels a little bit like if I were to fall down that path of thinking, it might make me feel like I'm at the whims of the universe versus with understanding, your personality type within human design. And now sort of like, we've just only had like one meeting with this course that you're teaching, even just that one meeting of understanding, particular centers and how somebody who has a defined solar plexus versus somebody who has an undefined solar plexus, how they navigate the world. And there's a lot of sort of permission to be yourself, which I think in this world where we all come up with a lot of conditions and narratives and stories and survival strategies, and they all sort of like layer on top of each other like pieces of plaster. I feel like the my personal path towards spirituality has been this subtractive one, where it's like, how can I unlayer these conditions? How can I unlayer these narratives? And it's always with this sense of curiosity of, who was I when I first came into this world and incarnated and showed up as this tiny being back in 1985, you know? And so really understanding like the things that I thought were wrong about me were actually all the things that were completely perfect and right about me all along, has been such a permission to just be myself. And I think of that as being like, I've also been in therapy as well. And, some of the most beautiful moments in therapy that I've had has been when I've shown my therapist, this is the thing that I think is going to be really scary and it's going to scare you off. Actually, I'm pretty sure you're going to be scared. And they just sit with it and they're like, no, honey, that's exactly who you're meant to be, you know? And so I can see how human design would just be this beautiful tool within this bigger context of therapy work that you're planning on doing. May I ask?
Absolutely.
Yeah. May I ask about some of your work with psychedelics?
Let's go there. Absolutely.
Yeah. I I'm kind of in this space of like dabbling, I would say, and like wanting to be respectful of the plants, wanting to be respectful of the cultures and the traditions that they come from. So I'd love to hear your take on how it works within the context of your retreats and the sessions that you've led and supported.
Yeah. Well, I think it fits in so perfectly with this conversation, Kat, around is this system telling you that it has the answers, or is this modality sort of having you shrug off your inner wisdom or this inner compass or guidance system and having you leave that at the door in favor of just following it? Or is it bringing you back to yourself? And I
Mm,
think that this is a really important juncture of human history where we have had religious systems and corporate leaders and governments telling us what the answers can and should be for so much of our history's planet. And I think we're shifting, we're turning the tide right now to finding answers within ourselves. And that feels like a big umbrella for all of these topics.
mm, love
And
that.
I feel like a responsibility to talk about this because as a therapist in training, and also as a psychedelic practitioner, and also as a human design reader, and also as a spiritual coach, et cetera, et cetera, there's so many bad actors in this space, people who get addicted to having the answers. And
Mm,
it's so important that you use so much discretion as a human being moving through this world, seeking advice and seeking guidance, asking yourself, is this person bringing me further into them and their answers, or are they guiding me back to myself?
mm, mhm,
And I want that to be the backdrop of the conversation with psychedelics because I think that with plant medicine, oh my God, there is so much power and potential here. We are also shifting the collective tide right now. The mainstream is becoming much more curious versus scared of
mhm,
plant medicines and psychedelics. And also, as a backdrop to this conversation, altering consciousness is what we all do every single day. Coffee and alcohol are two ways that are very socially accepted that we do this. But there are so many other pathways into altering consciousness. Journaling is a daily practice that I do to alter my consciousness.
mhm,
Breathing, taking a deep breath, which we did before we joined this podcast today, is a way to alter consciousness. So when you zoom out to that perspective, psychedelics aren't so scary. They fall under this umbrella of substances where it's expanding your perspective.
Yeah.
So where do I want to go with that? Is there a question that you have about psychedelics?
Well, I want to circle back to the backdrop that you just named and something that I think is so, so important. You sort of took it in the context of a client looking for a practitioner of like, are they granting you authority within yourself? Because this is a podcast for spiritual entrepreneurs, I think it's also important to name that as practitioners, it's really easy to get into a space where, and I'm going to name this as my own shadow side, like having come from a background in, you know, acupuncture, where it fits into a Western model where you are told that you have the answer. You are told that you need to establish authority. You are told like you need to come up with a treatment plan for the client. And even just in that energy of I know best, you take that autonomy and that sovereignty away from that client. And so actually like part of this journey that I think many of us are taking, and I think that that's the thing that you're naming is this shifting of the tides of people realizing, hey, that's not actually helping. That's not really healing folks. And in fact, we may be causing even more harm for some individuals. And so, can we think of a better way? And this better way is actually giving people back their power and giving them back their authority. And you know, you were saying earlier, it's all different paths up to the same mountain. And I think another way that I think of that is safety being the medicine. So it doesn't matter what the modality is, whether it's Reiki or acupuncture or human design, or, you know, like name off all the different kinds of modalities that are out there. But can you help your client feel safe? And from that safety, their body knows exactly what to do with that information. Our bodies are always wanting to find homeostasis and healing and repair. And so your body is going to understand safety and be like, oh, okay, so I get to actually regenerate some of my cells and do a bit of repair. And B, that's the space in which like nuance and gray and options and understanding come alive for people. You know, when we're sort of stuck in that fight or flight mode, thinking becomes really binary. The world starts becoming and feeling like a threat. And so to me, it's like, yeah, do whatever it is that you need to do to find safety. And with all these tools, understand that the tool is not the medicine, because, you know, just the same way that, you know, there can be enmeshed relationships that happen in therapy, and then really therapeutic relationships that happen in therapy. The same thing can happen with psychedelics as well. You know, you can reach for the psychedelic from the context of like, hey, I want to understand and deepen my understanding about myself, this situation, whatever is coming up. Or you can reach for it in the same way that you would reach for any other addictive substance. It's not the substance itself that's the addictive part. It's the like reaching for it in a scarcity, where you're trying to fill that hole and you're looking for something outside of yourself. And so I just wanted to like sort of highlight those pieces and just like reflect back how important they are on both sides of practitioner client relationships.
It couldn't have been said better, Kat. This Are you reaching for answers or things outside of yourself to show you the way? Or is it bringing you further and further back into yourself and your truth? And I have to say, what you're saying about the safety piece is so highlighted in your human design chart. You have an, you have an open root and an open spleen, and that's so much about guiding people back into safety and security and this feeling of being back in their bodies. So it
Interesting.
was so embodied in what you just said, and I just think such an important thing to ground people in as they explore psychedelic work. Um, are you giving yourself space to set an intention? Are you giving yourself the right setting? Are you with a guide where you feel incredibly safe and secure and like they aren't in it for the wrong reasons? Are you giving yourself space to integrate? There can be such expansive possibility that's unearthed during a psychedelic journey. And yet, it's not enough to just experience that expansiveness. You have to ground it into your experience and ground it into your human life. So are you giving yourself enough spaciousness to go there? And yeah, I think, it's a line from Spider-Man with much power, with great power comes great responsibility. But I think the same is true for psychedelics, that they can be misused. And so for folks to really tread carefully in this area, I think is really important.
I think one of the gifts that psychedelics has given me is slowness, because what you speak of like holding an intention, grounding, setting up space, like essentially like what you're talking about is presence in a lot of different ways. And in this world, in this modern world that we live in, there's just this like drive to like do, absorb. Like there's not a lot of time for integration. And so I think integration is that piece that is so, so crucial. Again, doesn't really matter what modality you're choosing. We happen to be talking about psychedelics, but in my experience with psychedelics, like if I were to just, let's say, have an afternoon with my mushroom friends and then just go out the door and like have the rest of my day like a normal day, that would feel disrespectful to the medicine. And also it would not allow for that digestion to happen. And I think that that's like mm, I want to say it's a bit, I feel like disease is too harsh of a word, but like there's almost this idea of like you have to just get it right away and not give yourself the time and the space to absorb it. And I was just talking about this with my one of my groups in business alchemist mentorship, and one of the gals was like, I'm just so tired. Like, why am I so tired all the time? And we're going through like some pretty big explorations of self right now. And I was reflecting back to her, like plants grow the most at night. Like they take in, they absorb, they, bring in the light during the daytime. And then nighttime is when they're actually growing their cells. And so like we also need to slow down and give ourselves the time to rest. And it might not seem like it's quote unquote normal that you need to take a nap in the middle of the day, but that's actually your subconscious being like, hey, we're digesting a lot, like you might need to absorb and like just chill out for a second. And I feel like psychedelics has given me that gift as somebody who's like pretty much on the go all the time. Like that is a welcome gift that I take in.
I don't think that disease is too strong of a word. I think that
Mm.
our society, there's so much that we can say. Any sentence starting with our society, I feel like it's going to be a loaded sentence. So I'll try not to go into trite oversimplifications, but the pace at which we're living is really intense. And psychedelics, I do think, have this incredible somatic body-based ability to bring our bodies back into center and that homeostasis of, oh, this is the pace at which my body is wired to operate. And oh, in the days afterward, I will move a little bit more intentionally and softly as I'm continuing to receive in my dreams and as I journal. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing, Kat. So as you're talking about this permission to like plants growing at night and the nap in the middle of the day that perhaps your logical mind is like, what? Nobody does this. Why are you doing this? I've also been engaging in an intuitive mentorship over the past year of really opening up my intuitive faculties, which we all have. It's not a superpower. It's not like some special people have it. It's just whether you open yourself up enough to receive the information that our body is taking in all day long. And it's been so cool to sort of intuitively feel into my life and into clients that I work with. And when you open up the sensitivity, you open yourself up to all of it. So I found now that when I'm, at a wedding that has particularly murky family dynamics that have not been resolved, I'll find myself the Monday afterward having to take a nap in the middle of the day. So it's not even always the growth that I'm going through. And I think that this is the case for all of us. And I'm not sure why this wanted to be spoken. But just, I think energetics is something also that our planet is waking up to, that energy is real. And even if you haven't physically exerted yourself, there is still so much that your body is metabolizing and processing. If you have a particularly intense work meeting where the dynamics of your team are just really, really conflictual, giving yourself that permission on the other side, like I get to take a beat, I get to rest, I get to sort of wring out my sponge energetically on the other side.
Yeah. That feels really important to name, and it's something that like I I don't know any other person who does this like as intensely as my husband, but he grew up in a like pretty tumultuous household, like lots of drama um, and such. And I started noticing like when he'd get off of a call with his brother or his mom, he would lay down and take a nap, like like as an adult, you know? And we started noticing that like whenever he goes through anything activating, and it doesn't even have to be like bad activating. Like the other day, we went and drove up to a plot of land that we're looking for land to purchase right now, and so we drove up and like looked at a piece of property, and afterwards he was like, "I gotta lay down," and so we just call them process naps now, and so anybody who's listening to this, if there's any permission slips that we can write for you today, like process nap, process slow down, process, whatever it is that you need to digest and metabolize your life's experiences, permission to do that without feeling the shame of needing to keep up with this very, very fast paced world that we live in.
Yeah. And if you don't have a template or a rubric for that and you feel very disconnected from your body, even if you lie down, you feel it racing, this is a great way that psychedelics can sometimes interrupt that dissociation and bring you back into your body. So, yeah, we talked about mushrooms. I've also had really powerful ketamine experiences over the past year, psychedelically assisted and therapeutic doses. And I've had some really, really powerful experiences on MDMA therapy as well, and also recreational LSD experiences. I haven't done ayahuasca, though I'm curious about that medicine if and when it comes into my field. But I think that folks talk about psychedelics all the time without naming the specific medicines, and I just
Yeah.
wanted that to be forthright with your audience today.
Yeah, yeah. I've only played with mushrooms. Do they feel different? Like energetically, they feel like their own individual little friends?
Yeah, I think that each medicine has its own consciousness. I really do.
Mm,
I also think that human design has its own consciousness. I think many of these modalities have their own sort of spirit to them. Mushrooms
mm,
are often called the little brother or the little sibling.
mm,
There's almost like fairy spirit. It can be very silly and also playful and very connected to nature, very connected to the heart. It's a huge heart opening medicine, so the heart chakra is a big part of that. And I think that each of those medicines sort of has their own different flavor, and it also interacts with our body's chemistry in a unique way. So,
mm, mhm, mhm. I like the idea of these intangibles having their own consciousness and their own spirit. You know, you talking about human design as having its own consciousness. Oftentimes, you know, when I am coaching clients and even in my own business, because I think about my business as being a spiritual practice, you know, I think about the business as having a consciousness, and I will actually speak to my business like it is a person. And, you know, a lot of my journaling is like almost like a conversation with my business, being like, hey, like, what's the next thing we're supposed to do here? And like, how do you want to express, and what's meant to come forth? And it's really, um, I think that again, like, we keep coming back to this wave point in our timeline of human consciousness, where it seems like we're starting to shift the tide, and it no longer seems wild to think about, hey, the flowers sitting on my desk here have a consciousness unto themselves. And, you know, it's okay to like start having these conversations with things that are not necessarily human.
100%. Everything is energy. I think picking up on what that energy is, even if it's not tangible and you can't see or touch it. Um, and also recognizing that there's so much beyond what we can sense with our five senses that wants to be communicated. So I
Mm-hmm.
love that you have these open dialogues with your business as its own entity and life force, because there are likely so many beings that are working in and through you with what you're bringing onto this planet right now, Kat. So
Mm,
I think it doesn't even have to be super esoteric or woo to just
no.
journal and ask, what does my business want me to do today? What does my
Yeah.
business want me to do this year? I One of my favorite prompts is, what does my spirit want me to know today? And just free
Mm,
flowing to see what comes through.
mm. That's such a great prompt. Yeah, I love that. And, you know, I think that we've been living in such a world that has felt unsafe for such a long time, you know? Like, like I think about having been born even 30 years before I was born, and how different my life would have been. Um, and how different each of our lives would have been had we been born, you know, not that long ago. Like I feel like we're in a place where we can actually stand in safety for a lot of um, different reasons. And again, like that idea of with great power comes great responsibility. Like I almost feel like there's a responsibility that we each hold, if you are somebody who can access safety, to be able to ripple that out into your collective field, whatever that looks like, whatever that feels like, and whatever modality that flows through you.
I think it's such a beautiful point, Kat, that it hasn't been that long since this semblance of safety, which some of us are really privileged and honored to hold in our bodies, have.
Yeah.
Like it's so rare, even as uh, those identifying as female on this planet,
Mm-hmm.
especially.
Mm-hmm.
And and we also have access to recognizing there are so many still on our planet that are not safe
Yeah.
and that are not secure. And so, how can we hold that duality and how can we ripple that out? Social media, I've been thinking a lot about social media lately, that it's this incredible tool. It's a self-publishing platform, it's a marketplace. Anyone can be connected to anyone. I was connected to you through, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the ethers, and then you found my podcast. So It's a really cool connection point, and it also helps us to stay connected to possibility. Um, I think influencer culture, there can be a lot that's said about that. But if you use social media and integrity of sharing the ripples of safety that you've been able to feel in your own body, that can be really expansive for somebody who's not quite feeling it in their reality and
Yeah.
then changing course accordingly.
Yeah. Yeah. And that safety, like being able to ripple that sense of safety out, I think it's important here to name that like you don't need to like fix people or save people. Um, Again, it goes back to a lot of these tools that we're talking about here, which is like, how can you inspire people to mm, find that inner truth within themselves, find their own medicine within themselves. Um, I don't know if you follow, there's a woman, I love her work. Her name's Veda Austin. And um, she does like just like as like a brief thing she's like the goddess of water. Like I don't know how else to like explain her, but she's like just her entire page is about water. And what she does is she will take petri dishes of water and then hold an intention or hold like a put the petri dish over like a picture of like say a bird, and then she'll freeze it. And there's this crucial point in between where the water turns into ice. It's like a plasma form, and it creates these like ice structures and like is able to like create these pictures. And I don't know if any of you guys are interested in this, her I think her handle is Veda Austin Water. And like she's been able to sort of like find these hydroglyphs of like when somebody, and she's had it replicated all over the world. She's got tons of students who do this method and in their own homes. And so like she'll hold the intention of like love, and it'll show like a very specific sort of hydroglyph because of the energy of love that the person is putting into the water. Anyways, she recently did a little experiment where she took a farm raised egg and froze the egg white of a farm raised egg. And it's got this like beautiful, like fern like almost like botanical kind of imagery that comes up with it. And then she froze the egg whites of store bought eggs, and it looks like fractured and a bit chaotic. And then she took the farm raised egg, put it in the center of a bunch of store bought eggs, and left it overnight, and then froze their egg whites afterwards. And what she found is that the farm raised egg was able to influence the egg white structures of the store bought eggs around it, so that in the next morning when she was able to like freeze these again, like they also had this like fern like sort of picture. And to me, that's the medicine that I think is this next tide, which is, you know, holding your strong center, holding this sense of like, this is who I am, and having your energy ripple out into the collective. You know, like that farm raised egg didn't have to do anything other than just be itself, you know, and it influenced the other eggs around it. And I think that there's so much of our culture that has been raised on like you have to go fix somebody, you have to go do this to somebody in order to influence. And more and more in like nature's giving us so many examples of this medicine of like just be you, like be the most healed you can be. and and that is the medicine.
It makes me so emotional, and I have a feeling that folks that listen are going to feel so inspired by that egg analogy. Um, because I think, especially if this is geared toward empowered entrepreneurs in the spiritual and wellness spaces, there's that little voice that says, people are already talking about this, or, nobody wants to hear what I have to say, or this has already been done before, or what are people going to say? They're going to judge me, or I need to have all the answers before I show up. And it's like, if you're just the egg at the center of all the store-bought eggs, there need to be so many more of those eggs that are just like, if you're just creating the ripples of love and you're just being yourself, the most healed self that you can be, that is enough. And that's what we're all being, whether you want to call them light workers or not. But I think that those of us who are listening to content like this are being awakened from within and being called into just making our energy on this planet cleaner and more pure and loving, simply by being.
Absolutely. And, like I said, that this is kind of that immature shadow side that I had to contend with for a while, having, the first part of my career being within that system. It's a hard thing to let go of, you know? And so I just want to name that too, is if this is a struggle for you, you're not alone in the struggle. And it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. But it is your responsibility to, again, like, look at the places. Maybe, like, for me, it came down to, my family structures of, like, feeling like I had a lot of responsibility to, like, actually save people in my family, like, physically save them. And 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 finding a lot of self-worth and value within that. And and so releasing that old story is what has allowed me to sit more in the seat of my farm raised egg white energy. Um, and and so I don't know, I think this is just to say, if it's hard, of course it's hard, because you're asking your consciousness to let go of a lot of stories that have kept you alive and have kept you safe for a really long time.
I think it's such a beautiful point, Kat, and I think zooming it out, as an aspiring therapist, this is something that I have to remind myself all the time, that every single person alive on this planet is a very wise soul that is being guided by many, many beings much more advanced than we could ever be, especially while we're in human form. And can I trust that while I can be the farm raised egg next to this person, that's the best that I can do beyond the guidance that they're receiving from their own inner wisdom and from their guides and from whatever other spiritual forces you want to name or not name, that their experience that they're having, however I am placing judgment on how it should be, is perhaps exactly what their soul signed up for, to experience, a new flavor of consciousness. And so that has been a really humbling thing for me to continue to sit with and to sit back, because as, a person that wants to be a therapist, I found myself leaning forward so much throughout my life of, like, let me get in there, let me roll up my sleeves, let me help. And so continuing to remind myself to sit back, sit way back in the seat of the witness. And also just, my job is, can I love this person? And continuously asking myself, can I love them? Can I love them? That's threaded into my therapy and my coaching work. That's threaded into my psychedelic work, sitting in those retreat spaces of just sitting back and allowing someone to have their experience. I think it's threaded back to this conversation of presence and stillness and rest. That's
Yeah.
pretty unfamiliar.
Yeah. And, I was just having this conversation with my husband. The other night, we went and listened to a talk of a man who survived the Holocaust. He had survived 12 concentration camps, and he's 100 years old. And I was kind of, I don't know, like, I feel like there's so much of the speaker culture nowadays where there's like a like a sense of the speaker wanting you to walk away with a particular kind of like download, or this is the message that I want to put out into the world. And this man just kind of like went through his like life experience, and it was like a horrible story to like sit and listen to. um and he didn't, like, he told it in a very, I want to say, like almost like neutral way. Like he didn't have a lot of emotions of like, and those German soldiers, and like, and he very well could have, but it was just, this is my story and I'm going to share my story. And we were driving back home, and we found ourselves picking out particular pieces of his story, and then like gleaning our own information from it, and like gaining our own sort of insights from it. And it was so funny because like I sat in the same exact talk that my husband sat in, and we had totally different little pieces to pull out from listening to this man. And it made me think, like, there's so much wisdom in him just saying, this is what happened to me, not prescribing this is what you should feel about it, not prescribing these are the ways, these are the things that we should take away from my story. He just told his story, and we each were able to glean our own experiential wisdom from it. And it made me think, how many other cars are out there on the road right now? Because it was like it was packed. How many other cars are out there on the road right now, like having completely different conversations and having completely different insights of exactly what it is that they needed to hear from this man? And I think that that is, again, like that deeper wisdom of sitting in your seat, being able to like sort of be in your own space, and allowing other people to feel into the ripple of that energy, instead of, again, as you saying, like, I'm going to sit forward in my seat and tell you what I think you should feel from this. And I don't know if that's like an older generation thing. Like I sort of like harken back to like Walter Cronkite days, where he literally just read you the news, versus the news nowadays being more like, this is what I think you should feel, and let me like, activate a lot of your nervous system, points in order to make you feel that way. And I kind of wish that there was a bit more of that, you know, of sitting in and being like, hey, can we just tell stories, and can we listen to stories, and then you get to glean from it, what you need to glean from it as your medicine.
I think that's so beautiful and woven all the way back to where we started with human design. If we all have such different and beautiful and differentiated life experiences and gifts and energy, of course, one story is going to be rippled out in 100 different ways. And it's all, the same side or different sides of the same diamond, which is
Mm-hmm.
human consciousness and expansion, and consciousness experiencing itself through all these many lives on the planet. And that sounds a little esoteric, but, like, we are all connected. We are
Mm-hmm.
all we all come from the same stuff. We're just experiencing it in different ways.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I've loved, actually, like when I had you do the human design reading for me, I had already kind of gotten a sense of permission from, you know, Instagram like posts, in terms of like, oh, this is what a manifesting generator is like. And it's like, oh, I'm not a scattered person. Like, this is actually, exactly how I'm meant to explore the world. And one of the things that has continued to, again, like that piece of digestion, I've given myself the space and the slowness to digest, is something that came up during our human design reading, which is the gate of conflict, of being able to sit in this gift of mine, which is I know how to be stable in conflict. And also, how does that show up in my life when my life is not in conflict, and how can I navigate that? And it's given me such a good insight and like permission to reach for the tools that I need, that I don't think I had really allowed myself to do previously. Um, and so, if there's anything to take from this talk, I feel like it's this concept of like just be yourself.
Totally. And for those listening, I would love to just explain where we're drawing this from in your chart for a moment. There are all of these different gates or gifts that are drawn from the Chinese I Ching, the Book of Changes. And these gifts are expressed in different areas of your life. And Kat's second most prominent gift is connected to helping others and helping herself navigate turbulence and chaos and difficulty. And it's translated through her ability to really not shy away from conflict, but instead go in and through it as a means of creating more intimacy and connection to others and to self. And I can feel this from you, Kat. The
Mm-hmm.
moment that we hopped on our first call together, I was like, this is a woman who, if things are out of integrity, she will say it. I know that you hold yourself so much in integrity with this gift. And what's cool is that as we're recording this podcast, the sun is actually transiting gate 36 right now, which is it is this gift of recognizing that it is always darkest just before the dawn breaks. And it is whenever it feels the most difficult, that's where the greatest, most fertile soil is, where spring will come soon enough.
Mm-hmm.
And you hold within yourself that remembrance. And each of the 64 gates in human design and in the I Ching carry kind of a thematic lesson for humanity. And it's been these tropes that have been existing in humanity since we began our journey on this planet.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think it's really cool that we're all learning this lesson collectively on the planet right now.
yeah. And I think that, just to bring it into a bit more of like practicality, I don't think I've had anyone explain the gates quite as well as you have. And to me, like that's kind of the thing that I was drawn into wanting to learn more about the human design. But then a lot of people sort of stop at the types and then the centers. And to me, like there's just so much juiciness within the I Ching, because it's really just the 64 symbols that describe nature, is how I think of it. And so where like these particular gates that are more or less activated for you, can you work with that energy that is just a reflection of nature? And to me, like this gate of conflict, I think at the time that you and I recorded um, the reading that you did for me, that was a couple of weeks ago already, and I was just in a weird place where I was picking fights with my husband for no reason. And, just kind of being a little shit. And, as soon as you said that, it was like, oh, my life is peaceful. So my energy doesn't know what to do with peace right now. And, he and I got a chance to talk about it. And he was like, does it have to be like chaos? Can I just take you out and like have like a spontaneous date night and like not tell you what's about to come, and can that be the conflict and the chaos that like you lean into? And I was like, that actually might work. Like that is one of the things that I think I was missing, is this sense of like spontaneity and like, oh, I'm a little bit back on my heels and I don't know what to expect. Like that's what I'm good at, you know? And so, you know, artificially creating these things to have my gate be happy um is actually, I'm kind of excited to explore that.
It's so beautiful and such a great analogy where it's like we can talk about human design in these sort of like lofty terms, but it's such a practical thing where you left that reading and you said, this part of me that I thought was wrong, picking
Mm-hmm.
fights, is actually innately how my energy is wired. And given that, how can I have healthy dialogue with my husband about this? How
Mm-hmm.
can I perhaps rewire some of my professional outlets and creative outlets to ensure that this is being nourished? And how can I start to steer my ship according to this newfound information that is actually not new at all? It's what I knew was within me, but I was perhaps ignoring or suppressing or not giving as much attention as it deserved. Again, human life is so, there's so much. Human design calls it the Maya, which is
Mm-hmm.
just on this plane. There is so much to be distracted by all the time. And human design really just brings the focus back to this is what you're really good at. So
Yeah.
lean into these qualities and go
Yeah.
from there.
Yeah. And I just want to reflect back too that like I feel like that reading felt a bit like, you know, the wisdom of you just sharing what you know. You know, you weren't prescriptive. Like you didn't tell me to go and like have a conversation with my husband about this. Like you just trusted that actually this is going to be what needs to be shared, so that she can then catalyze that into however whatever medicine she wants to catalyze that into. And again, I think just to sort of like bring it back to a lot of these threads we've been exploring of not leaning forward and allowing for the person to find their own medicine. And of course, it's going to be individualistic, right? Like there are some people who might need a little bit more of a push, and who might need a little bit more of a handhold. But to me, had you come into my space with that energy, I think I would have leaned back a bit and again pushed me off of my own seat of balance. And so, like, it's this really beautiful dynamic play of energies that we are all navigating as practitioners, of like how much of this person needs to be propped up and how can I do that, and actually when is the medicine for me to like draw back, and how can I allow for that drawback to actually be the medicine as well. So I just want to reflect back that that was very wise of you.
Thank you so much. I'm receiving that. But yeah, I think that the message I want people to take away from this conversation is you are the medicine.
Mm-hmm.
You are the medicine. And so much of what I learn in therapy school, this very expensive grad school program that I'm in, is recognizing the difference between going into a conversation with someone and saying, you have to change. Don't you know you have to change? You need to change. This is where you need to go. Versus just learning how to hold space and saying, reflecting back, like, that seems really difficult. That seems really challenging. What do
Yeah.
you want out of this situation?
Yes.
How can you drop into yourself? And it's not explicitly named as sort of like spiritual in any way, but it's a deeply spiritual practice to just hold space for someone else's unfolding and becoming. However, I feel like human design pairs so perfectly with really good therapy because once you've explored your wounding or your story and you've really come back into your power, I work with a lot of folks who are like, so what now? And human design creates this really specific and gorgeous blueprint of, well, these are the things that you've always been. What if you step more fully into these things?
Mm-hmm.
And from there, it's never, Kat, you're going to write this book or you're going to create this program. It's not specific in that sense. It's these are your innate qualities. What's the next way that you're going to express them into the world?
Yeah. Yeah. And it also gives a bit of curiosity for like what's to come next, you know. I think you mentioned during my meeting that I have a channel of money. I can't remember exactly how you had named and identified that, but um, like it's made me think about my own wounding around money and finances and thinking about like, oh, I wonder what that means. And I wonder how my spirit wants to express that and wants to bring that forward in life, and it also gives me a chance to almost sit back in my own witnessing and being like, oh, I don't need to strive so much, can I sit in the seat of my own witness as my business starts to figure itself out, as my own spirit wants to figure itself out, and as we sort of do this co-creative dance, like, can I hold like almost like a third party position of just watching all that play out? And that's been an interesting sort of process to watch as well.
I find that human design unearths the karmic lessons that your soul is here to have. So you coming away from this reading saying, okay, I have the channel of money. Money is supposed to be a theme and a lesson that I work with in this lifetime. Now I'm going to reflect on my own relationship with it, my experiences with it, how it's going to unfold in my business. Like that's exactly where it's supposed to. It sort of like brings your attention back to where it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And that's why I think human design is a lifelong self-study and tool for
Yeah.
introspection. I was just reflecting on my channel of transformation yesterday, where it's like, okay, I
Mm.
have this channel of transforming things mostly within myself. A lot of people with this channel have rags to riches stories, which very much was my story of like kind of rising up out of financial scarcity into abundance, etc. And just reflecting on that within myself and saying that story is not by accident.
Mm.
And what is the next thing that I'm turning this channel of transformation toward for
Mm.
myself and perhaps for others?
Yeah. Yeah. But again, and like it always starts with the self. That's what I think is so powerful. Is even just hearing your story of transformation can be really helpful and really important for somebody else to recognize their own transformations within.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, my dear, just wanting to check in and see if there's any last little pieces that feel like they need to be picked up.
I think for folks that are interested in human design, I get a lot of questions of where do I start? And uh, there's a book that we're actually reading as part of human design training. It's kind of the human design textbook. It's called The Definitive Book of Human Design. If you're looking to go fully all the way deep on this system, that's probably the best place to start. However, I have a lot of different podcast episodes about the energy types and the profiles and the authorities on my podcast. If you're interested in that, I also do readings. If that's something that you're interested in, that's what I did with Kat. But I would say follow your own curiosity. And then with regards to psychedelics, it's a difficult place to know where to start. But I would say listen to your body and draw it into your field, your energetic field. If you're looking for a psychedelic guide, stating that out into the universe and seeing what comes up in your field and what comes up in your life.
Mm-hmm. Um, as somebody who has been a client of yours, and has been absorbing some of your information, I want to just recommend the episodes. I can't remember their exact numbers. You might know, but the ones where you go into each particular human design type was really helpful. It was really nice having one specifically for manifesting generators, because oftentimes we get looped into either a manifestor or a generator, and so I don't feel like we always get our own little time and space to be explored. And then I loved the episode that y'all did with the profile lines. And so oftentimes when you pull up your human design chart, it'll say two numbers and then your human design type. And so you going through each of the profile lines was really helpful as well. So I want to just refer people to those specific episodes as being really really enlightening, and highly recommend getting a human design reading if that feels exciting for you. Nadia's great.
Thank you. I think that human design and a lot of the modalities we talked about today will call to you when they're right. So if you're feeling that kind of like telltale curiosity or energetic buzz when you hear us talking, follow that. If not, totally fine as well. It will
Yeah.
come to you when it's ready.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you want to drop your social media and website and all the ways that people can find you so it's easy for them to find you?
Absolutely. So you can find me hanging out at Nadia Last, LAST.com. Last is my last name. I find that some people are surprised by that. It's kind of silly, but also easy. And then my Instagram handle is at Nadia Last _. So yeah, I hang out on social, and I'm actually considering getting into TikTok
Oh
because
dear.
yeah, I know it's wild, but as that's why I feel like this farm egg conversation was so divinely orchestrated and timed. I needed to hear it because that's where a lot of folks are hanging out these days, and I can feel that a lot of farm egg type energy wants to be shared in a place where there's a lot of store-bought egg content. So
Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah,
stay tuned for that.
that's fair. And I will link all the things down below. And I so appreciate you taking the time to come hang out with me today. It's always
Okay.
such a treat. And I get to see you tonight for our class too.
Yes, Kat, I am so grateful that you joined this course. It's so fun, and I'm so honored to know you and to have you in my orbit. You have a deeply embodied and wise presence. And for those that are interested in hearing Kat's human design reading live, I will be posting that over on my podcast as well, some cross-pollination. And it was a really, really heart-opening and vulnerable conversation. So
Yeah, it was a lot
join
of
us
fun.
over there.
Okay. Thank you, Nadia.
Thanks, Kat.